I've got a stack of books. I have my coffee in my favorite mug. So let's talk about my March TBR. For my TBR this month, I'm going to split it up a little bit. I'm going to give you the books that I'm planning on reading in February, as well as my TBR for the Rereadathon, which I am participating in. I'll talk a little bit more about the Rereadathon later, but I will leave timestamps in the description below in case you guys are interested in skipping around and things like that. So the first book that I am reading in the month of March is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry. This is a book by Frederick Bachman. I am reading this as a buddy read with Murphy & Appear's Patreon group. This book follows, I believe, a 6-year-old girl as she goes and delivers letters to people that her grandmother wants to apologize to, along with the help of a very large dog. That's kind of all I know about this book, but I'm excited to read it. I haven't read any of Frederick Bachman's other books, but I've heard great things, and this one just sounded interesting and fun, and so I decided to pick it up with the group. The next book I'm reading is for the Unread Shelf Project, and the challenge this month is to pick the book that's been on your shelf the longest. I don't know which unread book has been on my shelf the longest, but I know the one that's been on my immediate TBR the longest is The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian novel about children who have developed powers, and the government kind of sees fit to take these children and put them in a camp because they're very afraid of what they can do in these abilities. And so this follows a girl named Ruby and a group of friends that she makes as they escape this camp and set out on their own and try and discover more about who they are and their abilities. This has become a movie recently, so I would like to read it so I can watch the movie. And the reason I really want to get to this book is that this was a gift from my husband. He gave this to me back when we were dating, and I feel kind of terrible that I still haven't read it. So hopefully I can get to this one this month and knock it off of my TBR shelf once and for all. So the next book that I want to read going along with my read-through of the Brandon Sanderson Cosmere is Warbreaker. I finished Elantris this last month, and so Warbreaker is Brandon Sanderson's next standalone. It takes place within the Cosmere and follows two sisters, one who has been groomed to marry the God King from the neighboring kingdom, who has been trained in politics and is the favorite of her father, and the other daughter, who's more carefree, hasn't had to learn about or worry about politics or anything like that, but at the last minute their father decides that he can't lose his favorite daughter, and so he switches their place. And so the younger sister, who has never been trained, is now off to marry the God King and kind of thrown into this political court and unsure of herself. The other sister then goes, I believe, to kind of rescue her and to take her sister's place and take her rightful spot as the wife of the God King. I also know that there is a very interesting magic system in this one that surrounds color and light, and so I'm really excited to kind of dive into that and learn a new magic system from Brandon Sanderson. I do have this book on audio, as well as I'm getting the physical copy from the library. It's just not quite in yet. So I look forward to reading more Brandon Sanderson this month. The last book on my regular TBR for this month is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the Grisha trilogy, following Shadow and Bone. I read Shadow and Bone this month and I really enjoyed it. I had to kind of hold myself back from diving in to book 2 right away because I had other things I wanted to read for February, but now that it's March, I'm really excited to get into this book and continue on with this world. If you don't know, the premise of the Grisha trilogy is that it follows Alina, who is a Grisha. She has, it's not quite described as magic in the book, but somewhat similar to magic. It's called the small science, but she has magic. She's a very powerful Grisha. The first book is all about her discovering her powers and training and things like that, and then towards the end of the first book there are some events that happen and there's kind of a cliffhanger left open, and so I'm excited to see where this goes and how this follows more of the war in Ravka and this world that I just absolutely adore. So I'm really excited to get to this one. So those are all the books on my regular TBR. Now I'm going to talk about the Rereadathon as well as the books that I'm planning for the Rereadathon. So the Rereadathon is hosted by Murphy Napier. I will link her announcement video below, and not only is it hosted by her, but it's also hosted by 21 other people across 1 week. So she has 3 hosts every day, one on BookTube, one on Bookstagram, and then one on Book Twitter. So you can kind of follow along with that. I believe the ones that are on Book Twitter are also book bloggers, I'm fairly certain. The Rereadathon just kind of challenges you to reread some of your favorite books. There are 7 challenges associated with the Rereadathon. You can count a book for more than one challenge, which is what I will be doing. I'm not going to read 7 books in 7 days, unfortunately. If I didn't work during those 7 days, I still don't know if I could do it. So I'll run through the books I'm reading, what challenges I'm reading them for, but if you want more information, it will be linked down below. The Rereadathon happens from March 10th to March 16th this year. The challenges are as follows: give a book a second chance, a recent favorite, an old favorite, a game-changing book, an unpopular book, a childhood favorite, and an unpopular book. The first book I chose for the Rereadathon is North of Beautiful by Justina Chen Headley. I read this book back in high school and I loved it then. So this book follows Tara Cooper, who is struggling with her self-image and self-confidence. She has a birthmark that is very prevalent on her face, and so kind of dealing with some of the beauty standards and that, as well as she has a very controlling father and trying to figure out who she is and where she fits in the world. And she meets a boy named Jacob who is kind of a goth kid, but she kind of learns that he has some struggles of his own, and they get to know each other. And through this, Jacob and his mom and Tara and her mom actually go on a trip to China, and I just remember it being a really beautiful book and a really moving book and very important to me when I was in high school. So I'm going to count this one for a couple challenges. This is going to be an old favorite because I loved it when I was in high school. It's going to be a game-changing book because for me it really helped me look at the way I thought about appearance and self-confidence and what it means to be beautiful. I'm also going to count it as an unpopular book because even when I read it in high school, I didn't know anyone else who read this book. I've never heard anyone else talk about this book, and so therefore I'm gonna kind of take that as the unpopular book. The last category I'm going to use this one for is giving a book a second chance, which may sound a little crazy because, like I said, I loved this book when I was in high school. However, I was a very different reader in high school. I liked a lot of different things, and I don't know how I would feel about half the books I read in high school if I read them now. And so I'm really hoping that I'll still love this book, but I'd like to give it a second chance as the reader I am now and see what it is that I think of it now and see if it's still as important and moving to me or if it's just kind of full of tropes and who knows. I don't remember a ton of the details, so it could be problematic, things like that. So I'm excited to read it. I found this copy at the thrift store and I'm really excited to annotate it as well to kind of help me discern my feelings about this book. So if you've read this book, let me know down in the comments and we can chat, but I'm really hoping that I'm going to love this book just as much now as I did when I read it in high school. The next book I'd like to read is The Secret Garden by Frances H. Burnett. I read this book in 2nd grade and have not reread it since, so I don't really remember a ton about this book, but I really loved it when I read it back then. So from what I can remember, this follows a little girl who finds a secret garden, and I believe there's a little boy in it too, and he might be sick. Either she's sick or he's sick. They find this garden and they go there and they play, and it's just kind of a magical place, and that's pretty much all I can remember about this book. This is a fairly short children's classic. This will also count for my classic of the month. This is a cloth-bound illustrated edition that came in a box set, and I actually got it at Costco. It does have some really beautiful illustrations in it, so I'm very excited to read this and to see what I think of it and to see if it still holds up as a good classic or if it's kind of a story more geared towards children and I'm not going to enjoy it now as an adult. we shall see. And this one will count as my childhood favorite. So the last book that I am going to try and get to for the Rereadathon, not sure if I'll be able to read all of this in 1 week, but my goal is to get through Illuminae by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I read this book just last year and I absolutely loved it. This follows two teenagers who broke up on the day their planet was destroyed. And then it kind of follows them escaping, and they escape on two different ships and they don't know where each other is, they don't know where any of their family is, and it's just kind of a giant mess. And not only that, but the attack hasn't ended there. They are now being chased down by the same people who attacked their planet. They don't really want word to get out that they basically killed all these people. So this is written in a series of files. It's instant messaging exchanges, emails, dictated descriptions of security footage. It's just a collection of all different types of media. It was fantastic when I read it. I loved it. It is one of my favorite books, and I've heard that listening to it on audiobook while reading along in the book is one of the best experiences you can have, and I have not listened to the audiobook yet. So I have it from Scribd, and I'm really excited. I'm hoping to fly through this. It only took me a day to read it the last time I read it, even though it's a huge book. Part of it is the formatting of it makes it easier to read and quicker to read. So this one is going to count as my recent favorite and as a popular book, because this is an incredibly popular book and series, and I still haven't finished the series. I still need to read Obsidio, which is the last book in the series, but hopefully rereading Illuminae will motivate me to read Obsidio. I will say it's probably not the best book to read on ebook because the formatting isn't quite there and isn't quite like as fantastic. So I definitely recommend checking it out in physical form. So those are all the books that I am reading or hoping to read in the month of March. Let me know what you guys are reading down below. Happy reading and thanks for watching.